I found the inner strength along the way. I didn't know I had it in me. I dare say that most people very likely don't realize they have inner strength in them until they're put into some extreme situation where it has to come out and emerge. Otherwise, you just won't make it. Hey, I'm Jeff Deskovic, and you're entering a world gone good.
Well, hello, my name's Steve, and this is the place where we shine the light on everyday people making good happen each and every day. Welcome to World Gone Good. What you're about to hear is part 2 of our good conversation with Jeffrey Deskovic. If you have not listened to part 1 yet, we highly recommend you pause this and scroll back an episode to catch up on his unbelievable story. If you have already listened to the first part, awesome. Proceed ahead. Quick reminder about our guest. Jeffrey Deskovic is an attorney and the founder of the Deskovic Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the exoneration of the wrongfully convicted, their recovery, and reform of the system. At age 17, he was wrongly convicted for a crime he did not commit. He served 16 years in prison before being exonerated. Here comes Jeff to continue sharing his good. You had 7 appeals go through.
Yes, I did. 7 of them were no. Then I went. Then I got turned down for parole. I got exonerated through a post-conviction motion. So the Innocence Project agreed to represent me. So let me just take a brief moment or two. Just the human interest backstory of that is after my appeals were over. You know, the only way back in a court is if you could find some new evidence that wasn't known before that probably would have resulted in a different verdict, or if there's a change in the law. So I started writing letters. I wrote letters, an uncountable amount of letters for 4 years looking for help. I didn't limit the letters to somebody directly in the legal field, but other people, if there were people and entities, if I perceived that there was some action that they could take which could set in motion a chain of events that could ultimately culminate into my getting the legal help that I needed, I wrote the letter. So one of the letters that I wrote, which was to a book author in care of a publishing company, somebody at the publishing company sent the letter to an investigator, and the investigator connected me to the Innocence Project, suggesting I write them, lobbying them, getting other people to lobby them. Then I got lucky that one of the intake workers there at the Innocence Project, who was not a lawyer, represented my case several times. After the lawyers there knew that I was innocent because the DNA excluded me. The problem is they didn't know what could be done because they needed some new evidence. The DNA had already been tested. But this intake worker represented my case twice. So getting them to take it the third time. So the Innocence Project agreeing to represent me was the first key. The second key is that the prior district attorney who blocked me in all 7 of my appeals, including trying to get further DNA testing through the data bank, she left office, and her successor was willing to give me the testing. And the third thing is we got lucky that the actual perpetrator DNA was in the data bank, and it was there because left free while I was doing time for his crime. He killed a second victim just 3.5 years later after killing the victim in my case. So on September 20th, 2006, my conviction was overturned and I was released. I reported back to court November 5th, 2006, at which point all the charges against me were dismissed on actual innocence grounds. The actual perpetrator, confronted with the DNA match, admitted he was the person who committed the crime, and so he was subsequently arrested, pled guilty, and was sentenced for the crime.
You're 33 when you get out of prison.
32, yes.
32 when you get out of prison.
Yeah, and then I turned 33 shortly after that, yes.
reclaiming your life, reconnecting with family and friends. What was that like?
It was extremely difficult. The overwhelming majority of people never came to see me, and the few that did, what the visits were few and far between. So I had to work through, some emotions there, which I didn't really realize were there, but I worked really hard at it. But when I would talk with them initially, it was a difficult conversation because I knew who they were intellectually, but I was a different person now, and so were they. But beyond that, as far as like with family, I mean, all my friends left once once I got arrested because I mean, why would someone's parents allow them to play with someone who's accused of a murder and rape, right?
Mhm.
So they were out of the picture, the friends. But other difficulties, technology was different. Cell phone, GPS, internet hadn't been created. Culture was different. Buildings and towns didn't look the same. There were just enough familiar things for it to look strange. So those three elements, culture, technology, and the physical change in appearance, made it feel like I was in a parallel universe, a world I didn't belong at. There was psychological after effects of my experience. There was the stigma around it. Few people questioned my innocence because even the government was saying I was innocent and the actual perpetrator was arrested. But the stigma instead surrounded the idea of, well, you were in prison for 16 years wrongfully. Yeah, but you were there for 16 years. So how much of that rubbed off on you? Is it safe to be alone someplace with you? So that was definitely a big obstacle in terms of personal relationships. I was always passed over for gainful employment. It seemed like all the would-be employers wanted somebody with job experience who could hit the ground running, which obviously I would have needed some patience for on-the-job training. So I lacked stability of housing. I bounced around from place to place, at one point coming a couple of weeks within a homeless shelter. And lastly, it was just lonely. But that's on the difficult side of the equation. Simultaneous to that, I kind of found myself as an advocate. I gave a 2.5 hour off the cuff presentation at the press conference when I was released, saying everything I ever wanted to say in 16 years, but could never get anyone to hear. And just when I was wrapping up, another thought came in my mind, and so it went. So a light bulb went off, and I realized I could be an advocate without necessarily being a lawyer. So I started speaking professionally. I became a columnist for a weekly newspaper. Those are my two ways of earning income. I was trading privacy for awareness by doing television, radio, print, and ultimately new media interviews. I was regularly meeting with elected officials, urging them to pass policy reforms aimed at preventing other wrongful convictions. I got a Mercy College gave me a scholarship. While wrongfully imprisoned, I got the GED. I got an associate's and completed a year towards the bachelor's. Then funding was cut for college education for prisoners. So Mercy College gave me a scholarship to finish the bachelor's. They allowed me to live on campus, which is how I avoided the homeless shelter. They gave me a meal plan. So I made good on that. I graduated, got the bachelor's degree. Tried to get into law school, but I didn't get in. But I thought then that getting a master's would make me a more effective advocate. So I have a master's in criminal justice from John Jay, and my thesis is written on wrongful conviction causes and reform. I got compensated financially after 5 years, so I took some of the money and started the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, whose mission is to free people and to do the policy work. So far, we've gotten 15 people home, and we've helped pass 9 laws. And then I got tired of sitting in the front row of the courtroom. I wanted to sit at the defense table, represent some of the clients, make some of the arguments, hence taking a second stab at going to law school. And, this time I got in and I became a lawyer. I have a caseload now and exonerated somebody, overturned a different wrongful conviction. And I have a caseload now.
That is a lot. Let's break it down. A couple quick things. Do you feel like you're heard now?
Yes, I feel heard and I feel seen.
And was that something you thought about through the years that you didn't feel you were, or was it something that just occurred? You know what I'm saying? Like, was it something you were working towards? Because it's something a lot of us work towards, not at the level and the things you've gone through, but you understand what I'm saying, right?
I do understand what you're saying. I never thought about it. Well, I I realized I wasn't being heard or seen while I was in prison writing all of those letters and otherwise trying to get help. So I did feel it that way, but I started feeling heard and seen from the moment I walked out, though, with the press conference because I figured out pretty quickly how to keep the media coverage, I mean, going. When I was in prison, I would keep up with people who were exonerated, collect the articles and use that as inspiration, but also to study it to see who helped them and what route did they take. And so I always felt frustrated that everybody would get their short 5 minutes of fame and then never be heard from again, and not really try to open it up for the rest of us that were there by at least talking about the prevalence of wrongful conviction. So I figured out as long as there's some new angle to it, some new spin or some new thing I'm doing, because I realize that they're not going to indefinitely tell my story over and over again. It has to be about what I'm doing now, and my story will just come in as like a background. So I figured out how to do that. And while I'm doing all of that, I realized that I'm being seen, I'm being heard, and I'm allowed to get meetings with elected officials, and that and that most it would be hard for a lot of other people to do.
Have you always had this inner strength? Did you find it along the way? I mean, we talked about, you when you were younger, you were a kid, right? I mean, so kids can be all over the place. Kids feel great one day and they feel like crap another. You know what I mean? Like that's just the emotional ride of being a kid. But that inner strength that you found, what do you think? I mean, because your story would make so many people angry. And I have to honestly say, other than being, I can hear the attorney in your voice. I'm not hearing an anger in your voice.
I found the inner strength along the way. I didn't know I had it in me. I think I dare say that most people very likely don't realize they have inner strength in them until they're put into some extreme situation where it has to come out and emerge. Otherwise, you just won't make it. So that's one thing. And another is I was angry the first week I was home, and I realized that the anger was destroying me, and so I decided that I have to let this go. So I had a few lines of reasoning. I mean, one thing is that I want to enjoy my life as much as I can, and I can't do that if I'm angry or bitter at the same time. I feel like I lost so much already as is. Why would I want to, in effect, lose the rest of my life? And thirdly, and this is the less the least loftiest of everything, if I was to be angry or bitter, it's not like I'd be impacting or harming the people that had a hand in what happened to me. I would really be the only loser in that scenario. And, the vehicle that allows me to actualize that is I take that energy I feel and I channel it into the advocacy work that I do. And so it's healing, it's cathartic, it makes a difference. My suffering needs to count for something. And I understand what happened to me in a kaleidoscopic type of way. Like I'm doing the work. I know I'm doing the work in the world that I'm meant to do. This is my purpose. That's why I went through that. And with that acceptance and realization, I have an inner peace.
It is so powerful, something you just said, which is you just said that the anger that you could have gone to, that really only would have hurt you. That wouldn't hurt anybody else except yourself. And it's such a powerful thing to say because think of how many things we get mad about all day, right? Somebody cuts us off in traffic, that person's taking too long at the register, at the supermarket, all the things that we get all angry about. It doesn't affect anybody else but ourselves. And the fact that you can find peace in some ways as quickly as you did is really, really, really amazing. And as we talked about earlier, inspiring.
Yeah, well, I mean, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, and I'll just quickly mention that, but maybe about 28 days before I came home, I had just gotten transferred to Sing Sing. I spent most of my time in Elmira, and I remember seeing on television there was somebody else who had been released from Sing Sing who had been exonerated, and in his media interview, he said that he wasn't angry, and my my reaction as I saw and heard that is I thought, well, that's the silliest thing in the world he just said right now. But at the end of that week, I realized he was right. But my point is that if I didn't hear him say that, I don't know. I don't. That helped me get to that conclusion. That helped me to get to that place. I don't know if I could have found or deduced that, what either that quickly or even at all.
Right. Your mom and your grandma, were they still around when you got out?
My grandmother was not. She passed away while I was wrongfully imprisoned, and that is one of the things that still, is difficult, emotional pill to swallow. I remember my mother shared with me that when her and my aunt went back home because my grandmother wasn't coming to court. When my mother and aunt returned back to the apartment after I had been convicted, my grandmother asked her, "Well, where's Jeffrey?" And, when my mother, told her what happened, she said, "Well, I'm going to be dead by the time he comes home." And that turned out to be true. My mother is still around, and so are the other members of my extended family. And when I've made rounds and had conversations as we all worked it through the years, because I've been home now for coming up on 20 years. There seems to have been a collective guilt that flowed through the minds of many of my extended family, especially the ones that never came to see me, but even the ones that did. Again, keeping in mind that the ones that did visit, it was few and far between, often being 3 or 4 years between visits. And, there's like a sense of regret, a sense of disappointment in themselves, that they, number one, didn't support me on the morale level. And number two, there were several times when my mother made rounds and asked if everybody would put in a manageable amount of money, combine resources, and hire the legal help that I needed. And, everybody declined to do so. So I feel like those feelings in them were present, and we had to overcome, they had to wrestle and overcome that also.
Have you forgiven the how do I want to say this? Not just the people involved, not just the police involved, but the circumstances. Have you forgiven that time in yourself?
I I don't think about it. I mean, to me, this question, although pretty similar to the "Are you angry?" type question we covered before, I think is still somewhat distinct from forgiveness. So, given that my answer, it was and is, it still is that I really don't think about it and that particular topic. I guess that means the answer is no, but with the caveat, I mean, it's not something I feel angry about or hold on to. I mean, I still have the psychological after effects of the experience, although that's not the question you're asking. I get what you're.
No, no, but you're right. But I mean, you're right. This is who you are. This is your journey. This was your journey. This still remains your journey to be happening. Just like every single person listening, just like me, everybody has the path that they went down.
Yeah.
And it's so hard in life, as with anything, right? I mean, you talked about your dad earlier, right? And we can all talk about family members. Did you forgive your dad? Did you know what I mean? For whatever, did you forgive your mom? Did you forgive this person? Whatever it is. So it really is a question, but it sounds like the evolution of who you've become and what you've been able to do. That's the good part.
That's exactly right. Putting it that way. I want to share that. No, I don't view as what happened to me as a good faith error. And I say that because, the cops use a threat and a false promise, and then which are illegal, and they lied about it in court. They didn't record the interrogation. Uh, then on top of that, when the DNA didn't match me, the police went back out into the field. They interviewed 17 witnesses, all of whom knew the victim in one capacity or another. All of them told the police that she didn't have a boyfriend. There was no consensual sex. And the cops didn't document those interviews. And therefore, there was nothing to turn over. We didn't know that. They falsely attributed a statement to me. The medical examiner fabricated findings. The prosecutor ran to the grand jury to indict me one day before officially getting the DNA test results back from the FBI lab, and therefore that evidence wasn't in front of the grand jury. My lawyer, what his performance was terrible. I think a solid third year law student would have did better. The judge, the rulings he made, I thought were very biased rulings, and I got the rubber stamp denial process on the part of the appellate courts. I mean, I'm arguing I'm innocent. The DNA doesn't match me. My constitutional rights being violated by the way I've been questioned, all these solid legal issues, and yet is the rubber stamp denial. And then the parole board, despite saying that, acknowledging that I had a excellent educational record, that had a good disciplinary record, but that, nonetheless, to release me would be the less than serious. It's not even willing to consider my innocence claim as a contextual matter for evaluating the rest of my parole application in terms of assessing, look, if we release this guy, is he likely to get arrested? I mean, I don't look at any of those things as a good faith error.
If they wanted to win.
Right. Yes, that's
And you see that in what you do now all the time.
I do. I do unfortunately see that all, in what I do all the time. And it is frustrating. I look, I know I work within the system as a lawyer, but, I take cases through my nonprofit. I only take innocence cases. I have to believe the person's innocent, and I have to see a potential way of proving that. We find new evidence of people's innocence, and then we present it to the court. So I'm not arguing in my capacity as a lawyer. I'm not arguing legal issues or technicalities or even something as important as constitutional rights. I'm just arguing, making innocence related arguments. And it is frustrating even for me as a lawyer, when very little of the court rulings, have to do with the facts of the law. Too much of it depends on, is the judge going to objectively consider facts and law, or is this just going to be a rubber stamp denial? I mean, I've lost a bunch of decisions at this point, mainly for two different clients where, the facts and law are clear, but it's the same rubber stamp denial. And so that part of it is frustrating. Just similarly, I mean, as an advocate, on the policy level, although we've helped to pass 9 laws, I mean, the amount of Herculean effort that it took to, and still takes. There's a lot of policy issues that, are addressing the causes of wrongful conviction that we're trying to, get passed into law to improve the system. And year after year, we can't, they won't give us a vote. Politics gets in the way. Oh, it's an election year, or we need to protect our marginals, people in districts that could easily flip and go to the other political party if they vote in favor of this, but yet we need their vote to pass it. So it ain't going to be, it's not going to be this year. Look, let the assembly say, well, let the Senate pass it first. And the assembly, let the assembly pass it first. And yeah, it's frustrating, and it still shows there's still not a commitment to justice, to fairness, to accuracy. Now, I can't tell you, and I'll sum up here. I can't tell you how frustrating it is, to be welcomed into an office and to have someone agree with you, and you leave your stats and your paperwork, and you get a metaphorical slap on the back, and then they proceed to do nothing.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I mean, the work continues, and when you pass a law or you free somebody, it's the best feeling in the world. I'm hoping that this year is going to be a big year for us. We're waiting for decisions from courts and district attorneys in a number of cases. But we're trying to raise funds, of course, so we need to add it. We desperately need to add an additional attorney and paralegal and other essential personnel. Beyond that, we would love to have a chapter of the Deskovic Foundation in each state in the U.S. and ultimately in each country, because I really see this as a worldwide issue. And countries where we don't hear about wrongful conviction, I can assure everyone that's listening, it's not because the system is getting it right in each and every instance. It's simply that no one's being exonerated. So it's intending for this to be, a legacy that will far outlive me. I do want to mention we have a crowdfunding page. If you put Patreon and Deskovic Foundation, I mean, what if 25,000 people, for example, were willing to sacrifice $3 to $5 on a recurring monthly basis? I mean, that would give close to $1 million, and we would be able to work on freeing even more people. Right now, we're at our limit. We really have a little too many cases. We have 13 active cases, out of which 4 are backburned, and 9 of them we're actively pursuing right now. But if we had additional resources, we could have additional personnel, and so we could unbackburner those 4 and work on freeing other people beyond that. But that'll be when we get the public support for that. In the meantime, we'll keep going the best we can with what we have, and I hope along the way, we can attract a celebrity spokesperson. There's double and triple digit millions and billions of dollars changing hands. It seems like in the last year, philanthropists and wealthy people donating to one cause or the other, and I hope at some point that somebody can see wrongful conviction and think about having some of the philanthropy go that way. I work 50 or 60 hours a week. I don't get paid for that. I'm fine with that. I have whatever I have through the compensation that I received. And, I have things invested in a conservative investments that pay a certain amount of money every month. So that serves in lieu of a salary for me. So I'm fine, but I need to hire other people and they need to make ends meet. So my only point is that nothing that's ever donated would ever find its way into my pocket under any line of reasoning. So I hope that speaks to our authenticity.
I think it certainly does. We close these shows with 2 questions. Don't panic, you know the answers. Question number 1 is this: who inspires you?
So Barry Scheck inspires me. He was a person who founded the Innocence Project, which is the organization that exonerated me. So, we pattern ourselves, after the Innocence Project. He inspires me. The main difference between my organization and his is they just take DNA cases. Which we do both DNA and non-DNA. DNA is only in 10% of all serious felony cases. So that's an important difference. But at the same time, he does inspire me, and so I look up to him in a lot of in a lot of ways, which will probably surprise him, because although I'm a former client and, I can't, in some ways, you could say in a minor way we're kind of rivals in the field a little bit. Even though, I mean, look, he's got the huge machine, man, that 13-14 million dollar budget. And, we're nowhere near that. We're maybe at around 150,000. So we can't hold a candle but to them, but still in certain ways, in terms of being thought leaders and significant figures in the innocence movement, we're kind of rivals in a minor way, but he still is someone that inspires me.
And the final question is not a question, it is a statement to finish. It can be about anything. Goes like this: tell me something good.
No matter what difficulty or hardship you might find yourself in, if you apply this formula, which I've come up with as a result of reflecting on the total arc of my life, I would say, have a goal, have a realistic plan, meaning you should be able to look at it 3 or 4 different ways, and then say to yourself, yeah, I could see how this plan might work. Remember that the goal is the goal. The plan's not the goal. So don't be afraid to vary the plan a little bit as long as you're moving still towards the goal. Don't be afraid of hard work. I'm not a pie in the sky, everything's going to be all right just because type person. I believe instead that you have to work really, really hard to put yourself in the right position for a miracle to then or to occur, or a door to open. No excuses. Sure, there may be reasons why something is more difficult to do, but no reason why you can't accomplish it. You just have to want it enough and to use a sports analogy, you have to play really hard and leave it all out on the field. And lastly, never give up. And when you feel that you can't go on anymore, do like I do. When I feel that way, I say to myself, this might be the key moment right here. I was on the verge of a breakthrough, but because I quit, it's not going to happen. So even though I can't go on anymore, I'm going to do it anyway, just to see what happens on the other side. And then once you overcome, then you got to reach back to somebody in the same position you were in and help them to cross that bridge. If you can do that, it'll be meaningful, it'll be healing, it'll be cathartic, it'll make your suffering count for something. And you'll be able to leave your little mark in the world.
Thank you, Jeff, for sharing your incredible journey with us. Next time on World Gone Good.
We have that saying, if you love them, so will we. And we always make sure that the decisions that we make, they're the most compassionate, and they always are made with the pet in mind.
Rima Jalba works with and for the Cinnamon Trust. What is the Cinnamon Trust? Great question. It was established in 1985 by Mrs. Averill Jarvis, who was inspired by her own heartache witnessing an elderly and terminally ill pet owner friend who was forced to give up their beloved companion. So in that moment, she created the Cinnamon Trust based after her own very beloved 17-year-old corgi, Cinnamon. And she created this organization that helps people in need, when they're in need, to get their pets taken care of. We are talking about people who have to go in the hospital, people who are in between homes, people who have an emergency of some sort, who just need someone to help out with their animal, be it fostering or walking or looking in on. These are all the things that happen. And that's what the Cinnamon Trust is all about. You know how much I love any animal story, and you love it too. So we'll bring it to you on our next all-new episode. Until then, be good.